Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I am an author, a robot, and today we're going to take a look at questions and ideas in our writing because YouTube loves the Reddit videos, and so let's see how writer YouTube loves the Reddit videos. Okay, I don't know how well this is going to go. I don't know what kind of answers I'm going to be able to give, but let's jump into it. So at the top here, and you can already see that I clicked this because I looked at it earlier. The problem with tropes and cliches isn't them. It's because they are used as shortcuts. So let's take a look at this conversation. The problem with tropes and cliches is that they are so known and so used that writers think they can short circuit that relationship. You say, why does the audience care? Because they understand this thing that stories do. For example, the two people hate each other and get together trope. You can easily use it in your romance story and short circuit the audience caring. They know the trope, they have seen it in things they like about it, dialogue is funny, thus instant success, yet the story itself feels so hollow. But why does the stuff we love that uses the tropes feel hollow then? Because the story actually involves the why. It suffuses the characters and storyline of why these two hate each other. It puts obstacles in front of them that make them realize actually they do love each other. That's the way it feels. That way it feels satisfying, not hollow. You can practically do this with all tropes. The point is not to avoid them or to use them. It's to get the why. So partially there, but partially not there. So every story is about the why. I like to call it the Meisner of story writing. And if you're unfamiliar with the Meisner method in acting, the whole point of the Meisner method is to forget that you're in a play or ignore that you're in a play and to have a genuine moment with the other person or people you're in the scene with. That way you can draw upon real emotion because you're in that moment. So you should be actually responding even though you have lines that you're actually responding with. And in order to do that, you need to know where you're coming from, where you're going to, and what is your purpose in that scene. And also, another thing you need to take account into is what you're at risk of losing or gaining from being in that scene. And so that's something that should always be there for every character in a scene. There should be no scene in a book or a movie or any kind of story where the characters there don't have a purpose. Like they're not there for some reason because their life demands it. There should never be a scene in a book or a movie or any storytelling that is just in existence in order for the character to tell the reader something. Every character in that scene needs to have a purpose for being in that scene. I was using the example, so I was ushering for a play last weekend. And so a couple of us were all sitting outside the stage area, waiting for the show to hit intermission. And if anybody walked in, they'd see all three of us sitting there. But the question is, well, why are we all sitting there? What is it that we are doing? What is our purpose for being there? Well, our purpose for being there is to usher and lead the people in and out of the stage area. Right now, our current area, as we're just sitting there quietly, is we're waiting for the thing to end so that we can let people out. So then imagine somebody runs in and says, hey, I lost my dog. Can one of you come and help me find my dog? Well, now there are two sets of people in this room. There's the group that is there for work and is sitting around. They look like they're sitting around doing nothing, but they're waiting. And the other one has come in with something urgent. That is, I've lost my dog. Can somebody help find it? Both groups of people have reason to be there. And they're both coming from something or waiting for something or going to something. So every character in a scene should have this. Now, going back to tropes, because that kind of is a tangent on, well, we have to get to the why. Tropes are just a recognizable pattern of what we're seeing. Like they mentioned the haters to lovers. That's just a type of story, like a recognizable pattern in storytelling, just like you can have billionaire falls in love with slave girl or employee. It's a familiar situation, a familiar pattern that we've become aware of, that we can spot in real life and often in books. It is not the tropes that make something bad. If something is poorly developed, hollow feeling, It's not because of the tropes, it's because it's poorly written. This person mentions the story itself feels hollow, and you have instant success if you use a trope. Actually, you don't, because a lot of people can see these tropes and then go, oh, the story is terrible because look at these tropes that use these tropes. A story isn't bad because of tropes. If a story is bad, it's because it's written badly. Just like if a story is good, it's not because it uses certain tropes, it's because it's well written. Good and bad stories all use tropes. I did a video on tropes a little while ago, which you can watch at the end of this, but basically every story you've ever known is a trope. The easiest way to say this is fantasy and sci-fi commonly have a chosen one story. That is a trope. Now, does writing something with the chosen one plotline automatically make it a success because it's something we're all familiar with and we can just shortcut good storytelling? No, because there are millions of poorly written chosen one stories. It all comes down to good storytelling. How many drafts should my book go through? Right now, I'm writing my 4th draft, which is basically a different yet improved and drastically different story from my first draft. My question is, 4 drafts enough? I'll spend about a week or 2 editing. It's completely after it's done. Do tell me your opinion and give me your advice. I really need it. Thanks. So there is no set number of drafts of how many is a good draft. Some people do 1 draft. I recently found this person on Twitter who goes, I just do 1 draft and then it's ready to go. Do not recommend that, by the way. But I digress. Some people do 2 drafts. Some people, I remember an author coming to one of my writing groups and doing a seminar, and she said she does 5 drafts, and each of them are different. Like the first one is the bones. The second one sets the mood music. The third one does corrections for how stuff sounds. The fourth one does like light editing. She had different sets for each of them, and she always did 5 edits. So every author has their own number. If we scroll down here, obviously we could see somebody 1 is rough draft, 2 is cohesion, 3 is weakness, 4 strength, 5 balance and flow, 6 is final edit. But not everybody needs that many edits. It all depends on your skill level. It depends on where your focus is at. It depends on how well that first draft went or that second draft, and the quality of the work that you want to put out. This also, I don't know if this lists any editing that comes with beta reading or getting an editor, which will add another draft. So there is no correct amount, but if you're going to, once you feel like you've taken the book as far as you possibly can, my recommendation is to hand the book over to somebody else, be it a beta reader or an editor, a couple beta readers, and get information from a new set of eyes. And then that's another edit. But take it as far as you can possibly take it, and then pass it to somebody else. Usually with me, I try to get it, I do my first draft, and then I do my revision, and then I do an edit to try to catch anything that really stands out. And then when I feel like I've taken it as far as I can and I need some ideas on what doesn't read well and when it slows down, then I pass it to somebody else for them to give me their feedback so that I can make those improvements for readability with fresh eyes. Starting to write a new book today, and I feel like an imposter. I'm writing several other books in the past, and every time I start a new one, I have this paralyzing feeling that I have no idea what I'm doing. How did I ever do this before? Who do I think I am? Etc. Really, it's like, how do I ever do this in the past? I feel like I'm brand new at this, a faker, an imposter. Anyone else have this sometimes? Update 6 hours later. Thanks, guys. It's over. And I've written 2,500. Yeah, see, all you can do, if you feel an imposter syndrome, all you can do is just sit down and freaking write and get over it. The more you write, the more comfortable you'll get with starting new things. I have been writing for so long and have been doing so many different things. I never feel that. My background in writing came from when I was a teenager. I started as a child. When I first learned how to write, I started out as a child. But my whole practice and background before college, I was a member of Gaia Online back in the early 2000s and all through the 2000s and even into the early 2010s. And I did Gaia role-playing all the time, which means I was constantly creating new characters, joining new worlds and new stories, and putting it out there publicly. So I feel I credit that role-playing as one of the things that made me more ready to just put my stuff out there, because I've been putting my stuff out there forever through role-playing. It really does help. How do you handle mourning a character's death when there isn't time to mourn? In the story I'm writing, one character has lost his cousin and his father. I feel like such a loss would devastate a person and cause them to stop for a moment. The character's emotional state is communicated, but due to the plot, he has to move on in an amount of time that I feel isn't realistic. The death is the character's motivation to do certain things, but I still feel like he becomes active unrealistically fast. Well, if the situation calls for it, your body and your mind can really force you to do something that seems out of bounds. And then when stuff slows down is usually when the breakdown hits. Talk to people who are in real situations about mourning or about mourning in dire situations, and even watch emotional movies where somebody dies and they keep moving on until stuff actually slows down and then it hits them. That's actually pretty common. I've had a chance to actually get book published, but I'm scared. I'm not good enough. I've had a huge love for writing ever since I was in middle school when I really fell in love with books. I have ideas I one day dream of seeing on shelves, and I have a friend whose mom is a published writer and could actually get my work published. I told him a few of my ideas and said there's a good chance I could get something published. My fear is, though, that I wouldn't be good enough. I feel like my ideas aren't good enough, that they're not creative enough, or won't do well. I know there's no such thing as an original idea, but I'm scared my ideas aren't original enough either, and that I'm not creative enough to pull anything more than mediocre off. Well, let me first say, look at all of the reboots and sequels coming out, and you don't even worry about not being original enough. Hollywood is not original enough right now. So you've got that going for you. And also, so I've written fan fiction for a couple of years now, and I get so many compliments on them, but I feel they aren't actually good. Maybe start off good, but end up becoming meh or bad. It helps to get compliments to help me get motivated and try, but always get a chapter or two in before I start questioning myself again. That's just normal. Most writers question their ability. You got to believe in what you're doing, though. That's the best advice I can give. There's a Neil Gaiman quote that goes along the lines of, you have to believe that your ideas are awesome, that everybody needs to hear them, and that your ideas will set the world on fire. You've got to believe in your ideas, and it's normal to feel self-doubt or to be like, oh, this is crappy, and you do have to actually be honest with yourself when you are editing stuff or when you receive feedback so you can critically edit and create something good. But authors also have a tendency to be overly critical of their own work. So there are those two sides. Best advice, write it down, do your writing, do an edit, get some beta readers, see what happens. At the worst case scenario is your first book's not great, but you learned a lot by doing it, and then you can write the next one. Unfortunately, writing is one of these things that you have to do it a lot in order to get good at it, and that's basically everything. Basically. Is there such a thing as too much dialogue? I'm going to say yes if it turns into talking heads. If it looks like a screenplay or a stage play, too much dialogue. Don't let me get lost in it. In my opinion. The literary community has adverse effects on my writing sometimes. I'll keep the definition of literary community vague just because I think people will know what I mean. The general habitat of the novel, from writers to editors to readers. I got into writing because I thought it was a great medium. Pretty much everybody, regardless of background, is familiar with a story and with language, but there's a way to perfect it that not many people have taken the time to do. I thought it was cool that a few specific elements make a story really good or really bad. I became fascinated with the fact that two sentences can convey the same meaning, but one is more beautiful than the other. I loved how some of the more complex human experiences could be conveyed using black and white text. I fell in love with literature as an art. After a few years, it seems that many people in this in these writing communities are focused on the commercial aspect. I get it. We all need to make a living, but even amateur writers and hobbyists seem transfixed on the mechanics and the jargon, the appeal of the mass market, etc. Everybody is buried in these listicle 10 tips to this, 3 things you need to do that, but when somebody backs away from the rules, it is either for the sake of rebellion or completely by mistake. Whenever somebody has a persuasive moment of imagination, they are instantly met with concerns about its marketability and genre. It sets a norm for new writers. I believe it teaches them that the mechanics and jargon all the way down. Of course, the structure and sound of all these devices we learn about are necessary, but I rarely see anybody truly express the soul of their work outside of these terms. It would be like joining a photography community where other people only talk about camera specifications and not the subject, or the painting community where everybody compares brushes and paints but not the inspiration to paint. I see new writers constantly asking for advice on alleviating writer's block, how to find motivation to finish their work, or how to get the courage to begin writing. In every case, they are offered advice about setting timelines, daily word counts, outlines, synopsis, and so forth, which is fine, but only if we all have started on the question, why do we write? Why are we write? What are we writing about? Why is it worth enduring? With that question answered, you can start to identify the tools needed to make it happen. Some of this is overgeneralized, of course. I met many people who agree with me on this, which makes me confident that it's not as large of a problem as it may seem, but I will speak from experience and say that the writing community adversely affects my work for a long time. As I was trying to find the motivation to make stories, I was constantly discouraged by people saying, you must have these 3 things and this and that. It must be this length or else nobody will ever want to read it. It's just not how good art is created, and I'm worried that not all amateur writers made it far enough to see that. Too long didn't read. There is so much depth to literature beyond the tools of this craft. New writers are trained to look at these first at the tools, then start making anything, as opposed to having a vision and then choosing the tools from there. I can't say that this was ever an experience that I had. Like I said before, I started writing as a role player online where there were no rules. I kind of, the only rules were the rules set by the forum, basically, where they just said, make these types of characters. And usually write in third person. Like, those were the kinds that, or write this many paragraphs. But there was no, you have to have this kind of training, you have to think of this sort of thing ahead of time. It was just basically create your character and throw them into the plot, and we'll see where it goes. I understand the focus on the tools, because those are the things that you're going to learn in college, and they're the things that actually build a story out. They're also the more helpful things. Specifically, how to build a story arc is important. How to create characters, depths of characters, is an important subject, because you're not going to create a marketable object. And they're going, well, see, you're saying the word marketable again, and you're saying that the focus is on market. Well, okay, so come into the writing community by saying what your goal is. Are you just trying to have fun? Because if you go into a professional marketing community, then of course they're going to be talking about the more professional side of it, the more business side of it. If you go to an online community like fan fiction or like role playing, there are going to be less rules and less focus on marketing, because nobody over there really cares about turning what they're doing into a business. But you go into a business side writing community, and you will find business-minded people talking about these things. So I guess if you really want to focus on why do we write, what are we writing about, why is it worth enduring, then you're going to want to pull away from the side that is the more business-minded writing community and go to the other one that does it maybe more for hobby, or is the more philosophical side of the writing community, because most of the people in a professional writing situation are going to be asking about these writing tools. I know the other day I did a tweet that said, hey, writing community, who do you pitch a screenplay to? And I was asking from a professional standpoint, and the response I got back was myself, because I write for me. Okay, that's great, but that's not business-minded. And if I'm trying to work in a business, I'm going to want business answers. If I'm trying to become an artistic pro, I'm going to want to learn the things that are going to help me build in the business, build a good story. I'm going to want to know the rules so that I can break them on purpose. And when you do know the rules, up here it talks about, well, when you break the rules either by mistake or for the sake of rebellion, and there are naysayers, well, if you're breaking it for rebellion, then stand by your choices and defend your choices and convince people to your side. If you do it by mistake, well, then people offering you feedback are just trying to help you to create a better product. And at the end of the day, that's if you want to sell your writing, that's what writing is. It is a product. If it's not a hobby, it's a product. So I don't know. I guess my question for this person would be, what is it that you are trying to accomplish with writing? If you just want to talk about why do we write, why do I write? Because I'm compelled to write, and I have ideas from my background. I have a perspective in my background. I can't stop writing because I have to share these things. I also don't like what I'm seeing in bookstores and television and movies, and so I'm putting what I see out there, and hopefully it'll interest somebody. What am I writing about? Good and evil a lot, comedy a lot, I could spend forever telling you about what I write about. So I'm going to pause on that. Why is it worth enduring? I can't stop. I have been writing since I learned how to put words on a piece of paper when I was 7 or 8. Why is it worth enduring all of the rejection? Because I think what I have to say is important. Everybody is going to have their own responses to these things. Everybody, especially based on their background and what they want in the future. But those are also the more philosophical things. The subreddit is described as discussions about the writing craft. So that's why you're going to end up with having a lot of questions about craftsmanship instead of philosophical or more neurological components or personal parts of writing, because this is about craft. Anyway, that will be it for today. Let me know if you like this content and if you would like me to do more videos on writing Reddit or some of the other literary Reddit areas. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, let me know that I'm doing something right, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.